You're listening to Autism Approved Radio, where we bring hope and help into your homes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
We are here again. We've been gone for a little bit, but we're pretty excited to be back with Listen In with Lisa and Kristin. Laughter, wine, and words of wisdom.
Yay! Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about top medical issues for teens. This is a big one.
Yeah, and unfortunately, for even families that start early on and do medical treatments, they think, oh, we're good, we're out of the woods. And honestly, you're not. You're not. No.
And it's funny because, as our kids are getting older, and I'm going through this right now. Jackson's 14, so I'm going into the puberty phase. And
I call it the fur phase.
I call it the mommy needs more wine phase. Because nothing I've ever read, like when we're pregnant, we read the pregnancy books, right?
Yeah.
And then when you first get the diagnosis of autism, you're reading all about the therapies and the diets. You don't really read about teen issues.
Right.
And so I think the show is so important today.
Totally.
Lisa, you've been there and you're still there.
Yeah, 19 years going with this knucklehead. He's and everything. What's interesting when we, and I'm sorry to change topics a little bit, when we see things as a little kid and it presents one way, we get used to that way and we treat whatever the labs are saying and whatever the behaviors or issues that are cropping up. But when you get a teen, those things change. Like Clostridia in a kid is different than Clostridia in a teen. And even though the labs may look the same, the age is different, the behaviors are different, and the responses are different. So I'm always blown away that what would make Jeff an absolute jerk, and I'm sorry, I love him, when he would get Clostridia as a younger kid, his behaviors would storm, everything would happen. Now, if he gets Clostridia as a teen / adult, he gets worse acne.
Oh, interesting.
So it's interesting to see the differences. So to think that you dealt with it or crossed it off your list when they're itty bitty, teens, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. Are you finding the same thing with Jackson?
Yeah, although with Clostridia, it's interesting because before, when he would get it, he would get more kind of stimmy, kind of like really in his own world.
Yeah.
Now he gets really irritable.
Yeah.
And there could be some aggression that happens with that kiddo. Which,
right.
If anyone's listening and you deal with aggression, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Not fun. And so what I love is that you can go to your specialized doctor and say, these are the symptoms we're having.
Right.
And instead of having a doctor put you on like anti-anxiety meds right away or to try to say, oh, this is just because they're going through puberty.
Right.
Let's look at these labs and let's make sure to cross off, anything that could be happening like
right.
Clostridia.
And we're talking Quest and LabCorp. There's nothing fancy about these labs. It's what your insurance covers, and you're just trying to treat and normalize your labs. So things that you did when they were itty bitty, you're going to have to look at and retest. And even if you go a year and a half, maybe, that would be on the longer side. Annual testing is probably the best way to look at it. And I know in my family it's probably twice a year.
Yeah, we do it twice a year.
Yeah,
We're
so
in the process right now trying to collect stool and urine. And,
oh boy.
Yay! The urine's fine. It's the stool.
Yeah.
That's like you're trying to figure out. Are you
the clothespin on the nose, the cleaning out of the toilet, the little receptacle.
And this will be our second time trying to get this stool because I had been on a trip and I told his father, I think you should collect the stool while I'm gone. And you had to have 3 consecutive days of stool. Well, you had the option of putting part of the stool in the refrigerator.
Right.
And you could have just put it in a Ziploc bag or you could have kept it at room temperature. So his father thought it would be funny if they put the room temperature stool in my room.
Nice.
Yeah. So when I came home, like, what is that smell?
No.
Yes, it was
not cool.
No.
Not cool.
So I would recommend putting it in a Ziploc bag.
Yeah, in the refrigerator.
If you have an extra refrigerator like we do,
yeah.
You could have put that there.
Ziploc bag, brown bag, / metal detector / whatever, Ziploc on top of it.
It's
triplicate.
how men versus women think is my guess.
Yeah, someone I think was just trying to play a funny joke because we're so obsessed with stool. It never goes away, right?
No, and the smell took a couple of days.
Oh, my Lanta.
Hey, we got to do what we got to do for our kids. And also, even just collecting the blood, I think, is different as they get older, too. Yes. When they were younger, it was, I believe, at least a lot harder.
Right.
Their bodies are different, too. Their veins are different. They're not understanding as much. like today it's a lot, especially for us, it's a lot easier.
Well, if you've been doing it a long time, for the families listening, and they have a teen and they don't collect blood on a regular basis, it can introduce all new challenges. But if you've been doing it a while, we find that they're more compliant. They understand, they know what the process is, and they can get it done. But for the families listening that haven't done it with their teen, you definitely may want to bring a friend or two with you, and something preferred in the activity, like a favorite video or something that will distract them. But yeah, that could be a challenge with a teen as well.
Well, and also they have the people that can come to your house now.
Right.
Which, oh my gosh,
I know, right?
Where were they before? They probably were there. I just did not know about them. We have somebody that I swear we call him the blood angel. He literally barely touches Jackson, and I mean, it's like he finds it right away.
Right.
Gets it. He's in and out in 5 minutes, and my son's outside playing right after.
And that's a sign of a good phlebotomist. If you've got a good phlebotomist that can make it where it doesn't hurt, I know sometimes they really are Dracula.
Yeah.
They're poking and pricking at you in different ways, and you're like,
out veins and that's what used to happen to Jackson.
Yeah.
All the time.
So I think it's all about the phlebotomist and having. So if you're listening, find someone that's mommy or daddy autism approved that can go in, get it done in the least painful, least restrictive,
easiest way.
Correct.
Yes. So that I think, people say, oh, well, they're a teen. Does that window close?
No way. We talked about that before. The window never closes. But, it was interesting, when we talked about topics for today, I went through the database at TACA and just looked at the last 2 years of data for teens and adults. And it's interesting. It breaks into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas, or maybe 4 specific areas, because one of them is a two-way that goes with 2 things that we see come up over and over again with teens, especially as puberty is happening, or even after puberty has happened, or even when people are in their 20s. We're seeing this data over and over again. So I really just want parents to be hyper vigilant for these particular issues, especially when you have someone that's in the first stage, as we called earlier. So the first thing we talked about was seizures. Seizures is a huge issue at puberty and in the 20s. We see a lot of kids that maybe were quote unquote seizure free, had clean EEGs, and I'm talking a 24-hour, EEG minimum. 48 is preferred by most neurologists that do treat children with autism and epilepsy or seizure activity. So that is the number one. There are people that are all the time calling and saying, my kid had his first seizure at puberty. So just because you did one at 3 doesn't mean you're out of the woods. I mean, you've done EEGs. We just did one,
probably about, my timeline gets a little smushed.
Right? It's all good.
Yeah, but I think it was about 4+ months ago, and we did a 24-hour one, and he was clean on that. But we never know. We'll do another one probably, unless we want to do one once a year at this point.
Right.
For us, because 1, our insurance covers it, and 2, because he's in that puberty phase.
Right.
We don't know if and when that will hit. We hope it doesn't.
Right.
But just from knowing all the families that I know and their experience with that, I would hate to miss that, to be able to treat that, to be able to help that, because I never tested for it.
Well, yeah, and if the newer research is showing, 65% of the population up to of autism can also have abnormal brainwave or epilepsy, and there's a new study, it's up to 80% with abnormal brainwaves, and that could also affect REM sleep. And when we did a follow-up EEG with Jeff after puberty, we noticed he didn't really have full REM sleep. Now, it could be the electrodes on the head that kind of disrupted. So we got him like a Fitbit jawbone, and I could see when he was in his deep sleep. Now, mind you, that's not scientifically proven, but it's interesting enough to know if someone's getting up in the night.
They're tossing and turning.
Right. Yeah. So you can get that kind of data.
Yeah.
So I'm really intrigued by, you may not find epilepsy, but you may find something that is totally treatable. Oops, sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone. So we want to make sure that that's important. We address that. And then the next thing that we see, and it kind of falls into the gastro side. Remember with kids with constipation and recurring diarrhea, We also see a lot with regards to anxiety, obsessive compulsive behaviors, and even acne would fall in that same category. There's something underlying in the gastro arena that could be inducing some anxiety. Could be hormones.
That's what I say. A lot of times, well, even girls, like we talk a lot about boys.
Right.
But, and I have no experience with the girl side, so I'm just going to, but I have families that have girls that, have shared certain things, and they'll, the periods, I'll be honest, we have to deal with what we have to deal with on the boys side, but I can't even imagine dealing with the period side. I imagine that must be difficult, especially if there's limited language and, things. But, it feels like people get through it, and I feel like there's a lot more help today from being able to, like for your mentor program that you have. Right. What I love is that you can match them up with another person that has a girl that can give some tips on this is what we did when they had their period. This is how we explained it,
Yeah, and we have on the TACA website too. It's going to go all over these things that we're describing in this show today. But there's a whole teen and adult, page and setting that you could go look at all the articles relative to the stuff we're talking about today, including, puberty with boys, puberty with girls. And they're different totally issues. Different. It's like Mars and Venus again, right? So I think that I would encourage families to, if you've got a kid that's approaching puberty, to do a little prep work, especially with the girls. There's some things that you can do to help get them ready. For when that happens.
I was afraid my own self.
I know, right? I was a late developer. I think I was 13 or 14 by the time it hit. But
I was nearly 18.
What? Yes. Mind blown. Okay, you win. Okay,
it came once, but it was just like a spotting kind of thing.
Oh, good times.
And then it never came back again.
Oh my goodness.
But I was also really active.
Yeah.
And so, but then when it did come.
Oh yeah.
It came with
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it was like,
that's good to know. But I think what's interesting when you look at, especially anxiety and OCD, which seems to be really common, you want to reevaluate with an O test and a comprehensive stool test, just to see if there's something that's, coming back from when the kid was younger. Maybe it would have shown as a negative behavior, now shows as anxiety, which can be pretty, overwhelming.
If you're trying to do anything with your child and you're trying to either, even just to go to the store or a new activity. That is...
New school.
Anything.
New teacher.
And so that, I think, it becomes their coping mechanism sometimes, where they've learned, as a younger child, they can't get away with X, Y, and Z due to behavior issues. But as they get older, that's their coping mechanism.
Right. And I think the thing that's interesting, if you look at first, seeing if there's an overgrowth or overabundance, it could be bacterial, parasites, something along those, lines where we're looking for something that may have approached a different way younger, but different now with a teen. You can treat it. And then sometimes what families have found, and we've found this, is we would run the O test and comprehensive stool test with our doctors with help. We don't do it on our own. We found that there was nothing in there, but yet he still had debilitating anxiety. So it was interesting. John Elder Robeson, great guy, wrote a book just called Turned On. And it was interesting. It's his whole findings as an adult. And he was doing this therapy in his 40s. It's called transmagnetic stimulation therapy. And it's about normalizing theta waves. And I'm dumbing it down for me, not for the listeners, but theta waves control a lot in how your emotions are, whether you have hypersensitivity or you're dulled in that way where you're not affected by, something major happening or minor happening. It's the same response.
And you found great
huge improvement. And again, it was something prescribed by our doctor. It's FDA approved for depression, addiction, and it's moving forward for post-traumatic stress disorders in our communities, for especially our military coming home. And we found such great progress in that. So you have to work with the doctor to figure that out and what's going on. And then the last thing that we see, God, all the time, is the pandas and the pans, which we've done a radio show on already, where there's an overabundance of strep. And it's been interesting that with teens are getting it right around puberty. And again, before it would have shown differently as a little kid, but different in once you hit puberty. I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but I want parents to really hit that home, that it's not always going to present the same.
And I think with puberty, like I said, we're really in the early stages, and I'll tell you how early we are. I would say it was probably about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Jackson woke up, and I was like, what is that smell? I'm like, what? My gosh. And so, like, I grabbed his arm, and I smelled under his arm. I'm like, oh, my goodness gracious, you have BO. This is awful. He has never, ever had
so
that.
Funny.
So I thought maybe I was going to get lucky, and it was going to be, like, a one-time deal, and I was going to have a little bit more time for this. And so even, like, these issues that you don't really think about. Because, you know, yes, we wear deodorant, and yes, you know, but you don't think about it if you're a little kid. You know?
Right.
And so then I had to research, you know, which one was gluten-free and which one didn't have non-aluminum, you know, that was non-aluminum, and what one, you know, it didn't have this and that. And I was at the health food store, I think, for about an hour and a half on the ground looking at like
all
every
the different
single
ones,
deodorant, you know, and then having to teach them like, okay, this is how you put deodorant on, and because I don't want my kid to smell. It's bad enough that like you have to deal with all the behaviors and make sure that they're doing this, this, and this. You don't want to have the stinky kid either. So I feel like that is a good sign that you may be going through puberty.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden you're like, okay, someone smells and it's not me.
It's just a change in the body, and we got to be ready for it.
So, that's why we decided this was a good time to get all the blood work done again. And this was a good time because clearly hormones are changing, you know.
Totally. And
he's growing. He's grown 5 inches within the last 7 months.
Oh, that's awesome,
you know. And so he's definitely having a growth spurt. You know, he's tired like a typical teen, I imagine. Who doesn't want to get out of bed, you know. So, you know, even when we have children with autism, we still deal with the stuff that everybody else deals with. We just have to figure out how to deal with it in their terms. And that's what I'm learning. So I even enjoy the show because I'm right there with, if you have a teen and you're new to this, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and it's just important to, you know, even though you feel like, even for kids that have made a lot of progress or you're still working on to get that progress, you still have to test and treat labs. And know that those are the top issues in the TACA database when we look at when we get calls for support. So it's important to just be really, you know, diligent. That, you know, if you see a major change in behaviors, like someone who gets really cranky, really obsessive compulsive, or aggression, don't just reach for the prescription pad or the doctor's prescription pad and ask for an SSRI or an you know, whatever. It's important to look at underlying issues that could possibly be there. Correct. Yeah. So we can't just rest once we feel we've gotten to the puberty phase. Our job's done. Our job's never done. No.
And then also, you know, for those listeners out there, especially if you have some, you know, an older child, you know, I get emails, and I'm sure you do too, Lisa, from families that, you know, their kids were 20s, 30s, 40s, and there wasn't this help in the same way for those families. And so I think even though, quote unquote, there may not be a teen, a lot of this stuff they can still, I mean, for me, I would still be going and doing these tests at that age.
Totally.
Because basically, you know, especially if you have a child that's older, biomedical, I mean, yes, it's been around for some time, but not for a family, and not in the way it is today either. And so I feel like that, again, saying that window never closes. I mean, what if there's something, even if your child's in their 30s or 40s, that you take a test and you go, oh my gosh, this is what they're lacking, or this is what they need, and you never knew. Imagine how different your life can be. And
we just, you know, we talked about this in one of the other shows, you know, that since 2005, there's more research every week on autism treatments than all previous years combined. So if you've been out of the game for a while, get back in the game, work with a MAPS, you know, doctor, and that's the Medical Academy Pediatric Special Needs, and figure out what's going on with your kid, regardless of age. So I encourage, just like you said, the window never closes, and that warrants a second look. Maybe that second look will bring up something that we can test and treat.
Absolutely. And, you know, guys, if you need any information of what we're talking about, you can go to Lisa's website. Yeah, it's
TACA. I wish it's definitely multiple authors, so not me. But, TACA now, TACANOW.org. And we're happy. You can click on the family resource pages and all the teen issues and the medical stuff. is all referenceable with the science.
Search and,
Put it up in the search. Yep. So if you're interested in the pandas, where it's the abundance of strep or obsessive compulsive or anxiety or the gastrointestinal issues we talked about today, including acne. And there's just so much. I've become an acne.
Let's talk a little bit about acne.
Oh, for the love of George. Feel really sorry for the kids. And what I found, and just this is anecdotal, we see a lot of teens out there. I'd say 3/4 of them are walking around with some serious acne. And usually that's indicative of something in the gut. Mm-hmm. And it could be an allergy. It could be just, again, an overabundance in one of the yeast, or bacterial infections that are just really going in a rampage. And what I've found, anytime Jeff is on antibiotics and or steroids, my gosh, his skin looks amazing. And the minute he comes off of those, his skin comes back very angry. I call it the angry face. Poor kid. So it's a lot to manage. And again, there's some great studies on minocycline. Minocycline works really well for acne, but it also has been studied for autism and blood flow in the brain.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's sometimes we can do a treatment that will help one thing and have also a side benefit. And of course, there's side effects. So I love being able to look those up and figure that out, and see what works with my doctor's help. So, yeah, acne is a big issue for a lot of kids.
Well, and I see sometimes some of the kids, especially as they get older, if they're not on a diet that makes sense for them, often you might see overweight, children. And acne, and so, I know Jeff, for example, he's on the best diet known to mankind. Yeah. So, and he's definitely not overweight. He's the perfect everything, right? Yeah. But I do see kids at conferences or, online, and, the first thing I always think when I see those children is, when I say children of any age.
Yeah. They could be 30 and they're still children.
Exactly. My son's
someone's baby.
When I'm 100 years old, my son's still going to be my baby.
Yeah, exactly.
I always think, gosh, what if they understood diet a little bit better,
Right.
And I think people will say, well, I can't change their diet because they're already a teen.
Right.
And I just don't believe that. I feel like today the foods are a lot easier to kind of, I don't want to say sneak, right?
Right.
But if you have a child who's in their teens or older and they're very obsessed with certain foods because maybe they never changed their diet, maybe it was just you didn't know about the diet, whatever the issue might be, I feel like today you can really add in some of their favorite stuff pretty easy.
We just helped. We just helped a mom. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. The 25-year-old son that she put him on the gluten-free, dairy-free diet just at 25. Hey, watch out for that wine. It's important. We got to save the wine at all costs. So I know that it's possible at any age. I went on it when I was in my early 40s and feel so much better. Not today because I've got a little nasal thing, but really it's just important to eat well. But, you're hitting a good point too, Kristin. And again, we don't want the radio show to go on for days, but just don't forget to get your kid physically out there too. Finding exercise
so
especially at puberty. If you think about back in the day when we were younger, we were always out and about doing things, whether you were a cheerleader, right? I was on the volleyball team, so we were always in practice or exercising, and we don't want these kids to be sedentary. No. So there's probably 40 different ideas on the TACA website. If you just talk about Get Fit in the search bar, we've got all sorts of ideas on how to start to get your kid out there, especially on or before or after puberty. They need more exercise.
The adrenals too, I noticed, because I try to take Jackson. We do a nature walk. We try to do it several times, during the week in the early part of the morning. But especially on the weekends, we definitely use that time. And I can tell you, his personality is completely different. Right. After that, rock climbing is also another thing. We're seeing a lot of kids on the spectrum.
Isn't he doing karate too?
Yeah, he does karate and gymnastics. Yeah. So we're very active.
And that's important. He needs that.
And bike riding, if your child likes to ride bikes.
Yeah.
If you live in an area, luckily we live in California, but right now it's summertime-ish,
Yeah.
So everywhere, for the most part, is a great time to get outside. But even if during the snow seasons for certain people that live in that area, rock climbing is a great, indoor rock climbing is great. Trampoline, they have the indoor trampoline parks now.
Right.
There's a lot of different stuff, and I'm sure you have stuff on your website. And I've just so enjoyed, talking about this.
Yeah.
I think we could go on for a lot longer.
Yeah, and I don't want to abuse people. They've been so nice to listen this long. So,
and if you guys have more questions about what Lisa was talking about, definitely go to talkanow.org. Also, feel free to go to autismhopealliance.org. We have resources there that connect you to lots of different links out there. Guys, just don't give up. We gotta just keep on keeping on, I guess. And it's. We don't have anything better to do, is what I always think of.
No. Well, I just think, just parting words, the teens and adults, if they have the issue of communication where they can't communicate well or at all, we really still have to be just as diligent and advocate for them just like we would as little kids. So
absolutely. Can't give up on them. There's so much out there. And like I said, like when I joke about not having anything better to do, I meant that our kids are so important. They're the most important thing we got.
Right.
So, guys, thanks again. And keep on looking for new shows coming up once a month. And, thanks for everything.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks. Bye.
You're listening to Autism Approved Radio.